The sun rose on a world remade, or perhaps unmade. Hollow Street was gone. Not in a puff of smoke, not in a blaze of glory, but swallowed. Sunk. It had descended several feet into the very earth it was built upon. A slow, silent cataclysm that had happened while the city slept. The familiar cobblestones, the crooked lampposts, the whimsical, impossible architecture that defined our strange little corner of the world, all of it now sat in a newly formed basin, a wound in the urban landscape. From the edge of the chasm, you could still see the tops of the buildings. The spire of the clockwork cathedral, which once pierced the clouds, now barely reached street level. The gables of the curiosity shop, where Mr. Abernathy sold bottled daydreams and secondhand shadows, were just visible, looking like the rooftops of a buried village. The air, usually thick with the scent of magical pastries from the Midnight Bakery and the faint, metallic tang of alchemy from Professor Phileas's lab, was now just dust. The silence was the most jarring part. Hollow Street was never silent. It buzzed with the hum of forgotten spells, the chatter of unseen creatures, and the constant, gentle creak of reality bending around its corners. Now, there was nothing. An absolute, profound stillness that felt heavier than any sound. We stood at the precipice, a small, bewildered crowd of former residents and onlookers. We were refugees from a place that hadn't been destroyed, but simply lowered, displaced. We pointed, we whispered, we tried to make sense of the impossible. Had it been an earthquake? A sinkhole of unprecedented scale? But we knew, deep down, it was neither. This was Hollow Street's doing. Or, more accurately, something we had done to it. The city officials arrived soon after, with their yellow tape and their grim faces. They brought geologists and engineers who took measurements and shook their heads, their scientific instruments useless against a phenomenon that defied physics. They spoke of unstable ground, of subterranean rivers, but their words were hollow. They couldn't explain the neatness of it all, how the street had sunk as a single, intact piece as if lowered on a massive, invisible platform. It wasn't a collapse. It was a descent. By midday, the official declaration came. Hollow Street was condemned, unsafe for habitation, permanently closed to the public. They erected tall fences around the perimeter, turning our former home into a public spectacle, a geological anomaly for news crews to report on. It felt like a funeral for a place that was still alive, just out of reach. We were ghosts, haunting the edge of our own lives. I remember watching a young official, barely out of college, trying to hammer a standard condemned sign into the ground near the old entrance arch. The hammer sparked against the air, and the sign clattered to the ground. He tried again and again, with the same result. An invisible barrier protected the threshold. This wasn't the city's jurisdiction, not really. It never had been. Eventually they gave up. As the sun began to set, casting long, mournful shadows into the newly formed valley, a new sign appeared at the entrance. No one saw who put it there. It wasn't an official city notice. It was a single, weathered piece of wood, looking as old as the street itself, with words burned into its surface. The letters seemed to shift and shimmer, as if written in heat haze. It said simply, "Please do not wake IT again. Wake it." The word sent a shiver down my spine, a jolt of horrifying understanding. We hadn't just lived on Hollow Street. We had lived on something ancient and vast and deep. We thought the street was a place, a collection of bricks and mortar, but it was alive, a dormant, dreaming entity. And our actions, the escalating magical feuds, the reality-warping experiments, the sheer chaotic energy we'd unleashed in our final days there. We had stirred it from its slumber. We hadn't broken the street, we had woken it up. And in its first groggy, world-shaking stretch, it had simply settled. It had shrugged us off its back, sinking back into the deep, quiet earth from which it came, seeking to return to its slumber. The sinking wasn't a catastrophe, it was a reaction, a self-preservation measure. The street was protecting itself from us. Looking at that sign, I finally understood. The strange whispers from the drains weren't faulty plumbing. The way the cobblestones would sometimes rearrange themselves overnight wasn't a prank. The feeling that the street itself was watching you, breathing around you, it was all real. We were living on the skin of a slumbering giant, a titan of myth and magic. We, the former residents, were scattered to the winds. We found new apartments in the mundane parts of the city, jobs that didn't require consulting tarot cards or enchanted artifacts. We tried to blend in, to forget. But how can you forget? How can you go back to a world of right angles and predictable physics when you've lived in a place that bent to the whims of imagination? Some of us still gather at the edge of the fence, especially at twilight. We look down into the basin at the silent, sunken roofs of our old homes. Sometimes if the wind is just right, we think we can hear it. A deep, slow, rhythmic sound, like a heart beating miles beneath the stone. The sound of something sleeping, dreaming. We don't talk about going back. We know we can't. The sign is a clear warning. Hollow Street isn't ours anymore. Maybe it never was. We were just temporary guests, fleas on the back of a dragon, and our time is over. We left our mark, and in return, it left its mark on us. Now, all we can do is stand at the edge and remember. The city has moved on. The news cycle has churned. Hollow Street is becoming a local legend, a ghost story parents tell their children. But for us, it's a constant presence. A hole in the world that mirrors the hole in our lives. We watch and we wait, and we hope above all else that it continues to sleep. Because we have seen what happens when it stirs. And we know, with a certainty that chills us to the bone, that we have no idea what would happen if it were to ever truly wake up. The final chapter of Hollow Street wasn't about its end, but about its true beginning. It was the moment we learned that the story wasn't about us at all. We were just a footnote in a much older, much deeper tale. A tale of a street that sleeps and dreams and must not be woken again. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to follow our channel for more tales from the worlds just beyond our own.